The best way to improve the overall quality of your operation is a comprehensive training program required for all incoming staff. Once your newbies transition into leadership roles, meticulous documentation can save the day when you have an abrupt staffing change. As educators, it is our job to teach students what we know. But as student media advisors, I think this quote from Albert Hubbard is more accurate. The object of teaching a child is to enable the child to get along without a teacher. We simply don't have enough time to sit down one-on-one and teach our students everything they need to know about their role within our organization. But what we can do is help to instill critical thinking skills that will enable our students to learn some things on their own. Good training starts at the beginning. Think about who among your entry-level staff members needs training. Anyone who's going to be live on air needs some form of training so they can operate within FCC guidelines. But in reality, the answer is everyone. Everyone who is associated with your radio station needs some form of training, whether it is a live DJ or a pre-recorded content creator. Why would someone who creates podcasts or videos, writes blog posts, or uploads Instagram stories not be entitled to a similar level of training? If someone doesn't turn on their co-host microphone, the mistake is over within the air break. But if someone defames a school administrator in a tweet, that's a lot more public and permanent. Here is a copy of the table of contents of the 2019-2020 Training and Operations Manual for WKNC 88.1 FM, HD1, and HD2, the stations I advise at North Carolina State University. As you can see, it is 15 chapters and 97 pages long. Before anyone freaks out that they can't possibly write a 97-page training manual, know that this sweet baby is a 14-year work in progress. I started at WKNC in 2006, and it took me 5 years, on and off, to go through and rewrite each chapter. At least every other year, I continue to update and add new information in chapters. Our newest edition is the Station Safety chapter, where I give information on fire and disaster drills, bomb threats, and active shooter situations. If you are starting a training manual from scratch, here are your 6 must-haves. Lead with your mission and organizational structure. Why does your station exist? Who reports to whom? What is everyone's job description? This will help new people understand their role in your station and know who to ask for specific questions. It's also handy when filling out new hiring paperwork to write "See Manual" under the question about your job description. Next is your programming strategy. Are you a freeform station, run block formatting, or strictly play one genre of music? Whatever your choice, explain why you made it and what it means to your audience. Sometimes new DJs want to play whatever they want. If that's not okay, the time to put a stop to that behavior is in training. The third thing any training manual needs is information about the Federal Communications Commission and Emergency Alert System. This is imperative for FCC licensed stations. Online-only operations are not subject to FCC rules, but they may choose to operate within FCC guidelines and best practices anyhow on topics like indecent and profane language, defamation of character, and conflicts of interest. If your station isn't regulated by the FCC, this chapter is optional. Next, you will have a chapter detailing your on-air studio and any logs you may have. This should be an overview of your equipment and automation system if you have one. I like to include some screenshots of our automation system so they know what to expect in the studio. Item 5 is policies and discipline. Do you allow food and drink in the studio? What's your attendance policy? How do you get suspended from your air shift? And how do you get straight up fired? This is all things every staff member should know, and is incredibly helpful to have written down in one place. Finally, you need what I call how to be a good DJ. This was the hardest chapter for me to write, but I finally approached it as if someone was sitting down with me in the studio. This is what I would tell that person about being a good DJ. This details microphone technique, along with how to select music and things to talk about on the air. Once you get the basics down, you can begin to add other chapters on things like your station history, promotions, and interview techniques. The WKNC training manual is linked on the previous slide and is easy to find using the search term WKNC training manual. You're welcome to use and modify parts of it for your station, but please provide appropriate credit to WKNC. On-air students at WKNC go through a rigorous training program that consists of 6 hours of in-class lecture, 4 hours of in-studio training, and a written operator's exam and demonstrative board test. The threshold to become a content creator, basically anyone who isn't live on air, is if you show up 3 times in a row, you get a volunteer paperwork. Training for these entry-level staff does not need to be as meticulous as those for on-air staff, but shouldn't be ignored or left to chance. For reporters and podcasters, they need to understand news value. What makes a story interesting and newsworthy? Where can they find story ideas? Since a lot of stories will involve human sources, they need to understand how to select a source, how to prepare for an interview, and techniques for conducting them. Since audio is rarely perfect, they also need some basic audio production and editing skills. Bloggers should learn Associated Press style, or whatever style you choose to learn. Consider giving them a short test to reinforce training, to limit the time your blog editor has to rewrite August 29th as AUG period 29, and take out exclamation points every other sentence. Headline writing is important for bloggers, so they can choose one to help increase clicks and shares. Finally, anyone who posts on your behalf on the internet needs to understand copyright and fair use of images. Now that your rank and file are trained, it's time to move on to the leaders and other paid staff. American Army General George S. Patton said, "Prepare for the unknown by studying how others in the past have coped with the unforeseeable and the unpredictable." There are 2 main problems I see with training student leaders. The first is that they're often trained by their outgoing student leaders in a few hours, so knowledge is certainly lost in translation. The second problem is that abrupt staffing departures can mean the person who previously held the position is nowhere to be found and left no instructions on how to do their job. Which brings us to the second part of Better Living Through Training and Documentation, how to document processes to help incoming leaders learn faster and prepare them to better cope with those unforeseeable and unpredictable issues their predecessors already faced. The term onboarding refers to orienting new employees within your organization. I maintain a Google Doc called Getting Started at WKNC that I share with all my new staff, whether entry level or in a leadership role. This should contain the boring things, like how to set up an I-9 appointment and sign up for direct deposit. If you clock in and out, explain the procedure for missed punches. Otherwise, explain how timesheets work and when they are due. Managing staff email is an incredibly helpful resource. At WKNC, we use perpetual email addresses, so there is information here on updating your display name and signature, along with tips on managing the clutter and creating filters. This might seem like basic information for someone who has worked in an office for years, but I have seen some messy student inboxes that can really benefit from a little organizational support. If students are required to keep office hours, let them know how to do that and who to notify if they have to miss them. This is where you would indicate whether office hours are allowed on evenings and weekends. If you have any computer use or printing policies, include them, along with the procedure for requesting tech help. Finally, everyone wants to know where they can park. The answer is nowhere. Having all of this information will come in handy as you share it with new staff and get all their questions answered at once. Make no mistake, teaching your student leaders is hard, especially if you've never done the job you're training them on. In a perfect world, the incoming and outgoing leaders will have overlap to allow for training. But that doesn't always happen, and it's not uncommon, for my station at least, to have gaps between when one leader exits and the other begins. Regardless of what type of transition you have, you can't expect your staff to know what is expected of them if you don't tell them. Enter the WKNC Howto Series. The Howto Series is a series of Google Docs that explain, ideally as thoroughly as possible, how to do a specific job, day to day. The idea was actually born out of frustration. One of my music directors had left, and the replacement MD was supposed to meet with me for training. It was a very hectic week, but I cleared my schedule to make time to meet with him. He ended up canceling at the last minute, and I didn't have time to meet with him again for another week. I spent the next 2 hours or so listing out everything I knew about how to add music. And how to add music at WKNC was born. This was knowledge passed down from MD to MD, but not really written down anywhere. I included lots of screenshots to show exactly how things should be done. This way, everyone would have the same knowledge base, regardless of whether their predecessor was still around to train them. Once I had the document in place, I had a new assistant music director follow the steps. If she found anything confusing, I changed it to make it more clear. The idea is to make it a Google Doc was to make it more collaborative. Anyone on our leadership team could edit the document at any time, as our procedures would sometimes evolve to necessitate new steps or make old steps irrelevant. The series is set up as a folder in Google Drive, shared with everyone with an @WKNC email address. All new files added to the folder have the same permissions and are shared with the same people. Everyone has their own how-to document for their positions. This is an excellent idea, but if you want to implement this, you're going to need buy-in from your staff. I started this project in early 2017, and 3 years later, at least 3 of these documents only contain a title. But you'll also see a number of last modified by names that aren't my own. It takes a little nagging, but every time I teach a student something new, I remind them to write it down what they just learned in the how-to document. Some very specific tasks a student may only do once a semester, so having them write it down is both beneficial to them and their successors. I'll reiterate this one more time. When a how-to series really comes in handy is when a staff member leaves and you have a gap between them and the next person. If you don't know how to do the job yourself, it can be incredibly difficult to train someone else on it. This happened at WKNC when our multimedia director resigned unexpectedly, and we had no one to replace him. Then when we finally did find someone, we realized there was 0 documentation on how to do the job. Having every new staff member learn the job from scratch is wasted time when you could have instructions already laid out. Yes, everyone will do things a little differently, and that's okay. That's why it's a Google Doc and not a PDF. So what do you include in this document besides everything? Start by creating an outline of the duties listed in the position's job description. This is what I wrote up for the station's promotions director in just a few minutes, since their how-to document was blank. One of the promotions director's primary duties is to manage station giveaways. I start with a little paragraph about what that means, and that we typically only request tickets for genres we play on the station. For example, if a fantastic jazz singer was coming to town, we wouldn't ask for tickets because we don't play jazz. Concert tickets are the station's primary focus, but if we happen across tickets to movies or sporting events, that's okay too. Then I move into a list of venues and contacts, noting two we work with regularly. I also include a sample email to send to the venue contacts. This way, a new promotions director doesn't need to spend time drafting an email from scratch. And finally, I include a header for making giveaway sheets. If the sheet template happens to be in Google Drive, I would link it here. That way, if the promotions director isn't available on short notice and someone else needs to make a giveaway sheet, the template is readily accessible. This document can obviously be expanded upon, but it is a great example of what you can do in about 5 minutes that can have a lasting impact on your organization. Finally, one of the best parts about using Google Docs for your How-To series is if you utilize the heading structure, like in this example, you can use the outline function to quickly find the help section you need. You will want to use the title style for your document title, How to Be a Music Librarian, and then headings 1, 2, 3, and so on as you move through the document. In this example, Manage New Music Box is a heading 1, and Library by Shelf and Library by Color over there are heading 2 because they're under the Manage CDs and Music Library heading 1. The Styles option is in your Google Doc menu between Zoom and Font.